Hi, I'm Jim Gabe, founder of Citizen Arts. Welcome to our new episode of In Their Words, What Public Officials Do for Us. This series takes a close look at some of the vast range of people who serve us at the federal, state, and local levels. Why a close look? Because we entrust them with responsibilities and powers that affect our lives in big and small ways every day. If you haven't listened to our prior episodes, here's what you've been missing. A state secretary of state who does far more than certify elections. For example, fighting cyber election misinformation. An interlude with a non-judgmental judge with insights into the noble role of those called to the bench. A state rep, a self-described lifetime fighter for equal rights who gets 90% of her community's vote. A district attorney, a prosecutor born to solve homicides, to do justice for his brothers and sisters. A coroner dedicated to giving voice to those who can't speak for themselves. A sheriff recognized nationally for his leadership in the oldest continuing non-military law enforcement profession. In this episode, Citizen Arts is honored to present a conversation with Janeé Hanzlick, 4th District County Commissioner, Johnson County, Kansas. Commissioner Hanzlick explains how county governing fits within the sometimes vast, puzzling structure of state governing, how it melds with the towns, cities, schools, sheriffs, and other local governing entities funded by your property taxes. Thoughtful, empathetic, devoted to the communities she serves, Commissioner Hanzlick takes the barbs and shafts of sometimes angry, frustrated, even armed constituents. This is too often a part of being a public official these days. Sometimes we get it wrong, she says, but we're trying to leave things better than we found them. I look at this opportunity as a privilege, not an entitlement or source of self-identity. And when my time is up, I'll do my best to help prepare the next person to have that privilege. You'll find her full bio in the show notes and at citizenarts.org. Welcome, Commissioner Hanzlick. We so appreciate your taking the time to join our discussion.
Well, thank you, Jim. I really appreciate your efforts to educate people about parts of their government that they don't generally think about or understand, but yet in a lot of cases they vote for the people in those positions. So thank you for the opportunity to help educate people about the Board of County Commissioners.
Well, it's our pleasure, and that's a great segue. How many of our listeners knew that counties are one of America's original forms of government? It dates back to 1634, when the first county governments were established in which state?
Virginia.
Yeah. And they originated in
England with the shires.
With shires. And the organization and structure of today's, how many county governments?
There are, I believe, 3,096 county governments.
And they're chartered under state constitutions or laws and are tailored to fit the needs and the characteristics of the state and local areas. And the counties are governed by locally elected officials, including more than 19,350 county elected executives and board members responsible for many things, which we'll get into. Since we're focused on the word county, let's start by getting situated. Tell us about your county, Johnson County, Kansas.
People often associate Kansas with windswept prairies and cattle and cowboys and the Wizard of Oz, but Johnson County is actually a more urban county. We're part of the Kansas City metro area, and the majority of Johnson County's 630,000 residents live in the densely populated northeast part of the county that shares a border with Kansas City. Our county is the economic engine of Kansas. We're a regional leader in job growth, and we are a central hub of development and innovation. We have some major industries, including telecommunications, healthcare. Garmin is here in Johnson County, the global positioning system company. Our county is considered to be affluent and thriving. We have wonderful quality services. We just did our county survey, and 97% of our residents said that Johnson County is a great place to live.
Jeff, our producer, and I have been to Kansas City, and I think we could have used some help from Garmin to understand at which point when we're driving around, we're in Kansas or we're in Missouri. There's no river or park or anything that's demarcating, at least in the areas we were. We were constantly asking people, which state are we in? So how does that work? Is there a convivial relationship between the two states?
Yes, actually, this year I have the honor of serving as the chair of the board of directors of our Mid-America Regional Council. We're the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, that brings together local or elected officials from across the metro area to work on transportation issues, security, emergency management. And I'm proud of our region's collaboration. We recognize that we sink or swim together.
That doesn't necessarily extend to sports, though, does it?
Not always, not always. I think everybody here in the metro area are Chiefs fans and Royals fans, and now our wonderful KC Current soccer team, a new stadium. Even though those are all located in Missouri, the pride and the participation extends throughout the region.
What does the Johnson County Board of Commissioners do?
I want to be clear that I'm talking about the form of county government that we have here in Johnson County. Other county governments have different structures, but here in Johnson County, we have a professional county manager who runs the day-to-day operations of our county under the guidance and policy direction of a 7-member board of county commissioners. And of those 7, 1 is elected at large as the chair of the board, and the rest of us are elected by our various districts in the county. The primary role of our county governments here in Kansas are, first of all, to serve as an administrative arm of the state. We are required by the state to provide things like elections, to oversee motor vehicle registrations, public health. We don't operate the courts. The state does that, but we provide the courthouse, and we also provide funding and support for the district attorney's office. In addition to that, we have mandated state services that we provide, including mental health services, public health services for intellectually and developmentally disabled individuals. We provide emergency management, as well as things as seemingly less important, like noxious weed control.
Are you involved in the actual development of legislation governing local jurisdictions and budgeting to enable programs to proceed?
Absolutely. Preparing the county's budget is really our primary responsibility, in addition to setting policy. In fact, we're in the middle of our budget season right now. We're looking at a $1.8 billion budget for our county. We take action on resolutions, and we can set policy in regard to the direction of the various programs that I mentioned, how much emphasis and how many resources we're going to put into particular programs for mental health or aging services.
Are you involved in education?
No, the schools have their own school boards. The only time that we've been involved in that is during the pandemic. The Board of County Commissioners also serve as the County Board of Public Health. So during the pandemic, we were in the position of having to make decisions about masking requirements, which businesses were staying open, which were required to be closed. and also in regard to schools, whether kids were required to wear masks in schools, whether schools were open or closed. It was a challenging time, certainly not something that I had anticipated being responsible for when I first ran for office.
A city, they might have a mayor, an elected mayor. In your case, you have a county manager appointed by your board.
Yes, and actually the chair of our board would be the equivalent to a mayor in a city. They serve as the face and the spokesperson for the county government throughout the region.
And in a place like Kansas City, where you have Kansas City, Missouri, and you have Kansas City, Kansas, is there overlap in overseeing? How do you say, well, at this point on this street, these are the rules, and you cross over and these are the rules?
As I mentioned, we coordinate through the Mid-America Regional Council, which serves as the metropolitan planning organization, which is required by the United States Department of Transportation. We are responsible for putting together regional transportation plans and presenting those to the federal government. Much of our funding for those regional transportation initiatives comes through the federal government to the Mid-America Regional Council and then to the local levels. And then we have 23 cities within Johnson County, and the cities are responsible for maintaining the roads and bridges within their own jurisdiction, but the county does have funding to help them so that not one city is burdened with the responsibility of taking care of major roadways.
How does this work, let's say, on the public safety side, where you might have police departments and you might have sheriffs? Who's accountable to whom? Is there somebody over all of this who is giving direction, or do they have independence in operation?
Within the cities, they have their own police departments, their own local law enforcement, and the chief of police in those cities is hired by the city staff, usually the city manager. The sheriff's department is a little bit different. The sheriff has responsibility in the unincorporated area of the county. And in Johnson County, about a third of our county is still outside of the cities. The sheriff's job is primarily to patrol the unincorporated area, run our 2 county jails, serve warrants, and then provide backup to the local law enforcement when they are called upon. And sometimes they're called upon regionally too, when something's going on in other parts of the region and they need all hands on deck. The sheriff in Johnson County is elected on a partisan basis. And it's a little bit of a tricky relationship because the Board of County Commissioners, while we are tasked with approving the sheriff's budget, we have no authority over how the sheriff operates the department. There are state statutes and case law that require the Board of County Commissioners to fund the sheriff's office and department at a, quote, appropriate level, and that's not defined. If the Board of County Commissioners is deemed by the sheriff not to be funding that department appropriately, the sheriff has legal recourse to force us to do so. So it's a tricky, difficult situation, depending on if you have a sheriff in office who is willing to be transparent and accountable, or you have a sheriff who's more protective of his department and less transparent. It can become adversarial.
Is there the same sort of gray area of responsibility between the county commission and other governing entities within the county?
The only other 2 county elected positions are the sheriff and the district attorney. And the district attorney's office is a little different because even though the Board of County Commissioners approves that budget, the district attorney is under the authority of the state court system. But with the sheriff, there is not. And you may have seen nationally, there are movements like the constitutional sheriff movement, which our current sheriff is part of, in which they see themselves as the primary law enforcement officer of the county. And they have the authority to abide by federal or state or local law or not as they see fit.
Pardon me if I'm repeating here, but take education. Are you approving the educational budget or do they have complete control of operation and budget?
The county has no authority over the school's budgets. The mill levy and the budgets for each school district are set by that school district's school board. It gets a little confusing for residents because the state tasks the county with collecting all of the property taxes that support the schools, the cities, our community college, and other entities like cemetery divisions. So when they get their bill, unless they really look at it, they assume all of those funds goes to the county. However, only about 20% of their bill actually goes to support county functions. About half of the tax bill on an average homeowner in Johnson County goes to the schools.
Where I live in New York State, tax bills are levied by the local town or city we live in, and a portion of that is allocated to the county. So
Oh.
it's sort of the reverse.
Mhm.
You get the sense that it's the local city that really has control of most aspects of budget. And would that be the case in Johnson County? That the local town or city has day-to-day responsibility that affect most people's lives?
I would say most likely, for example, the cities are responsible for maintaining the roads within their cities. But I get a lot of calls from people having a problem with their road in front of their house. If they live in a city, I refer them to their city council people and their city staff because the county does not provide that service in their city. At the same time, the county provides the major public safety services, like we have a countywide ambulance service. The county oversees the 911 system, but the cities really deal with the day-to-day development and planning within their own cities. For example, a big issue here, and I think it's a big issue probably throughout the country, are tax incentives to bring businesses into cities. Our county does not have any authority to issue tax incentive financing, but we get a lot of calls, people complaining about why are you incentivizing this or that? And I explain that is your city government. If you don't like what they're doing, you need to talk to your city council.
Could you give me the name of one of the larger towns in your area?
Well, the biggest city is Overland Park. I represent about half of that city.
How do you, as the commissioner for that district, coordinate with, I'm assuming there's a mayor in Overland,
Yes, yes,
and there's also maybe a city council?
there is. Well, I'm fortunate because I have good personal and professional relationships with our mayor and with city council members, especially those whose wards are part of the commission district. Many of them I've known for years just through community activities. I meet with the mayor. We have a standing meeting for breakfast together every other month. We frequently call each other because there are many issues that overlap between the cities and the counties. Just a couple months ago, I invited the city council people whose wards are in the 4th Commission District to come to the county admin building. I gave them a County Government 101 presentation because many of them were fairly new. I do that because there are so many constituent issues that people don't know who's responsible.
You said earlier that some taxes are collected through the county commission. Who sets the tax rate?
We set the tax rate for the county government. Obviously, the cities set their own tax rates, the schools and the state set their own tax rate. Under the umbrella of the county government,
As a taxpayer in Johnson County, living in Overland or one of the other places, am I getting one tax bill?
Yes. The county sends out all of the tax bills. The county is responsible for the real estate appraisals. And even though the state sets the system by which those appraisals are made, the county is responsible for hiring the county appraiser. Using the appraisals and then the mill levy that's set by the county commission, that's how each property owner's county taxes are determined. And it's the same thing with the schools or whatever their mill levy is applied to. The county prints the bills and sends them out. For a lot of people, because they're paying their taxes through their mortgage payment, often they don't pay attention. They just know, oh, my monthly payment went up a little bit. But if someone gets the bill and pays it directly, those folks see the line items. Here's how much goes to schools. Here's how much goes to the city. Here's how much goes to the county. I always carry my tax bill with me when I talk to constituents, so I can show them on my bill, here's what I pay. And I have no control over what the schools are charging you.
Let's say I'm an Amazon-like company and I'm thinking of putting a distribution center into your county.
Mhm.
It's going to affect transportation, utilities, law enforcement, schools, and the rest. What is your role in making something like that happen?
It depends on where it is. For example, the state of Kansas negotiated with Panasonic to bring a huge EV battery plant into Johnson County. It's under construction right now. The county contributed $15 million to help fund road improvements and also put half of the funding into a new fire station. We don't have a lot to do with the actual negotiations. That's the state and the city. Where we do have authority is Johnson County government operates 2 airports. That is the area where we do have more authority to negotiate what goes in there. We have authority to issue some incentives, issue industrial revenue bonds.
What would be a particularly prominent challenge your board is dealing with these days?
One of the challenges for the past number of years is accepting and responding to the fact that our county demographics are changing. When I first moved to this county almost 30 years ago, and I was working at a domestic violence agency, when I would seek funding, I had such a hard time because people didn't believe there was domestic violence in our county. That is no longer the case. People have recognized we have housing problems, we have homelessness, we have poverty. And so the county is adapting to addressing those issues and struggling with who is responsible for what. There are some folks that want the county to be responsible for solving all those problems. There are others that want nonprofits or the faith communities to do it. So that's been an interesting change in our county. And I've been part of conversations to help raise awareness and help address these issues. Another big issue, Jim, was interest in developing utility scale solar farms in the unincorporated areas of our county. At that time, we had no regulations or ordinances defining what could or could not be done in regard to solar farms. So our planning board spent at least a year working on that. And then our county commissioner spent 18 months looking into what that all involved. It was a very contentious situation because there are people that live in the unincorporated area that don't want the agricultural appearance of that area to change. And then there are landowners and farmers that said, hey, I want to be able to rent my land for this use. so that I can get income off my land without having to farm it, and I can keep it in my family. The Planning Commission presented guidelines that would basically have made it impossible for any utility scale solar developments to take place. As a Board of County Commissioners, we changed it to make it possible. I felt very strongly that it was important that those developments be able to come into our community as an economic development tool. To date, we have not had anybody apply to put a solar facility in, but we think it's just a matter of time.
We do see a lot of that in other parts of the Midwest, for sure.
Yes.
When you decide to run for a public position, you generally do so because you feel you're going to bring a certain attitude and voice to that position. Did you have that in mind, that here's the commission, here's what I can bring, and I think it could be helpful?
Yes, that absolutely was the situation. As I mentioned, I'm a social worker by training and profession. Before I was first elected in 2018, I served as the director of Johnson County's domestic violence agency. I'd worked there for 20 years. And so I was very much involved in the community, interacted with county commissioners, legislators, city folks. And when I decided that I wanted to step down from that position and do something else, frankly, running for office was not on my mind at all. I wanted to go back to more direct social work services. But some folks, including the former board chair of the agency where I work, came to me and said, there is nobody on our Board of County Commissioners who has any background or interest in human services. And that is one of the county's major responsibilities. We think you should run for office. At that time, also, the Board of County Commissioners were all men. And they said, we need women on this commission. The more I thought about it and the more people I talked to, I realized, yes, I do have a unique perspective and a unique background. I can advocate for vulnerable people in our community. I do understand how government works because I've administered millions of dollars of federal and state grants over the years. And so I ran for office and have been very pleased that I've been able to bring that voice and that perspective to the county commission. And I think I've been able to make a difference. In fact, we are in the process right now of planning a homeless shelter, which I don't think would have happened if we didn't have my voice and other voices on the county commission to raise the concerns about the lack of services for unhoused people in our community.
Well, I'd want to thank you for your service as a social worker. My daughter is one, and so I have a soft spot in my heart for that work, which oftentimes is not fully comprehended by the public.
I have to say, Jim, I sometimes laugh. Angry people will come up to me and say, you just want to do this for the power and the money. And I laugh and say, yeah, that's why I'm a social worker. I love power and money. I would have gone in a different direction if that were my goal.
You were elected for your first term, it was about 4 or 5 years ago. Was that your first time running for public office?
Yes, it was.
What was that experience like for you?
I really enjoyed it. It was the hardest work I have ever done. It was also exhilarating because I was learning new things all the time and from people much younger than I am. My campaign staff were all in their 20s. My favorite part was knocking doors and talking to people and finding out what their interests are and being able to educate them about the county because I worked hard to educate myself about their property tax bills or how their wastewater bills are calculated. On election night, I was down by 22 votes and I thought, well, that's it. This was fun. I'm glad I had this experience. But my campaign manager said, no, you are going to win because they still had to count all the mail-in ballots. And by the end of that week, I won by 178 votes over a two-term incumbent.
Hmm. And it's a nonpartisan election?
Yes, we run on partisan basis.
How does that work?
It means there is no R or D after your name on the ballot. Oftentimes, with things becoming more partisan, people do know where you stand on things, but you're not supposed to put symbols on your materials or your signs that indicate your party affiliation, although unfortunately there are some who do. The idea is, let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about what we want our county to look like in the future and what's the foundation we need to lay without having those partisan divisions overlaid on top of those discussions.
How does a campaign get funded if they're not getting monies from, say, the Republican or the Democratic state committees or local level committees?
The majority of money for my campaigns has come from my just calling people, calling residents and asking them to support my campaign. Now, I will say, even though it's a nonpartisan race, there's nothing to say you can't accept money from a party. And in fact, my campaign did get funding from the Democratic Party. So that's not prohibited. But as I said, there's no overt connection with a party. I've had support from Republicans, Democrats, people in between. But raising money is no fun. Let me just say that. Even though I did it for many years in the nonprofit world, it's just tons of work.
What do you do when you're not doing your public service?
Wow. Well, that's one thing about being an elected official. You're really on call 24 hours a day. And I tell people all the time, call me anytime. I'm glad to help. Especially over these past few years with the pandemic, it's really been important to focus on taking care of myself too, because it can be pretty brutal when you're sitting out on the dais being called every name under the sun and having to be walked to your car because of threats.
I can't imagine, Janeé, anyone would threaten you about.
Oh, yes. One of the things I think I've become somewhat known for is demanding accountability from our sheriff. And that has not gone over well with some people. Unfortunately, people think if you ask for accountability, you're saying you want to defund their budget, which is not the case. But I feel very strongly that every department in the county needs to be accountable and show how they are trying to be efficient with their funding. And so, yeah, I've had threats about that. I've had threats about the face masks during the pandemic. It was pretty brutal.
Was there a county ordinance? Did the county have people isolating at home? Is that where those decisions were made?
Yes,
Public?
and requiring people to wear masks in public and for certain businesses during certain times. Our board held fast in the face of some ugly and scary people. There literally were times in the morning my husband would say, I sure hope I see you tonight.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I mean, we had people walking through our meetings with open carry, just carrying their guns and yelling at us. It was a scary time. When I'd go home, I would cuddle up with my family and spend time with people who are supportive, who gave me encouragement.
What have you learned about yourself from being a county commissioner?
I believe that I've become a more confident person. I have strong feelings about certain issues, but I'm able to remain calm. I've learned how to explain my position in a factual, data-based way. I've learned it's very important to be consistent. To me, that's what integrity is. If you say you believe something, then you need to show that on a consistent basis. I see some elected officials waffle all over the place depending on what they think people want to hear. I look at this opportunity as a privilege. It's not mine to keep or own being in this office. It's mine to be the caretaker of while I'm here. Sometimes people come up and say, we're going to make sure that you aren't ever elected again. That's okay. I have other things in my life. I am doing this as a service. This is not my whole life. Whereas there are other elected people, I see that it's become their identity. And I don't ever want this to become my identity. I enjoy it. I appreciate it. I learn so much every day, but I'm not entitled to this. So when my time is up, it's up, and I'll do my best to help prepare the next person who has this privilege. One of my favorite poems, in fact, I have it right here. I keep it on my desk, and I also keep it at home, is If by Rudyard Kipling. He says that you should meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. Some days people are going to love what you're doing. Some days they're going to hate what you're doing, but you have to be consistent and have integrity. And that poem reminds me of that every day.
That's certainly what one would hope for in our public servants. As you say, it's not always there. Can you snap a finger? You do that?
Yes.
I'm not hearing anything. I didn't hear anything.
I'm not a very loud snapper.
Well, we get the idea. If you could change something in Johnson County with a snap of a finger, what would it be?
I would love to see an adequate diversity of housing for people at all stages of life, because that is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, challenge in our county right now, as well as across the country. We have so many folks that work in Johnson County that can't afford to live here. We have folks that can't afford to rent here. And these are not people in poverty. These are middle income folks, our teachers, police officers, and firefighters. The other part of it is our population is aging. And people like me, for example, my husband and I bought our house almost 30 years ago. We paid about $140,000 for it. It's now worth about $350,000, which I know compared to New York prices, that seems amazing, but we really can't afford to move. We'd love to downsize to a one-story maintenance provided, but they are so expensive, we can't afford that. So here we sit in a 5-bedroom, 3.5-bath house within walking distance of an elementary school. Lots of my friends are in the same boat. So if I could snap my fingers, it would be to have our need for diverse housing be met. And that's a big issue that I'm working on right now.
Janeé, listening to you, the genuineness really comes out clearly in public service. One of the things that gets us going at Citizen Arts about this series is people who, like you, are doing great work and want to get the word out about what they do and how they do it. Very often it's not understood. And people are so focused on the national level, but really what affects our lives most is what goes on at the local level.
Absolutely.
And on the local level, there are many people doing great work, and you are surely one of them.
I think most local elected officials feel privileged to serve their communities. There are lots of hard decisions, and sometimes we get it wrong, but we're trying to do the best we can to make sure that we leave things better than we found them.
We so appreciate your giving us time for this discussion and helping us understand the sometimes challenging distinction amongst the various local governments. You have the towns, the cities, the independent agencies like sheriff's office, understanding how this comes together to make things work for us.
I really appreciate, Jim, you're not only inviting me to be in this conversation with you, but also for your efforts to educate people around the country about the various responsibilities that local leaders have. And I look forward to hearing more and learning more from your podcast.
That's what motivates us to do what we do. We wish you all the very best. I just can't imagine anyone ever threatening you.
I appreciate that. You can't take it personally. People are frustrated. Being a social worker has been very helpful. It allows me to look at people who are angry or upset to think, how did they get to this point? It's not about me. When people say, oh my gosh, how can you stand to be up there and hear all these people screaming and saying all these nasty things? I say, I listen, but I don't let it become part of my soul.
I'm sure the vast majority of your constituency appreciate that very much. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day out there in beautiful Kansas.
It is a beautiful day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
There you have it, dear listeners. the latest episode in our Citizen Arts series, In Their Words, What Public Officials Do for Us. We hope you found this conversation with Commissioner Janeé Hanzlick enlightening, and we hope you'll join us for upcoming episodes with the likes of mayors, city planners, tax collectors, firefighters, U.S. Congresspeople, and more. On behalf of Commissioner Hanzlick and my Citizen Arts colleagues, heartfelt thanks for tuning in. I'm especially grateful to Jill Gabe, our executive producer, and Jeff Lewis, our producer and technical guru. Citizen Arts is dedicated to presenting information, analysis, and constructive opinion about matters of civic importance. We're a not-for-profit 501c3 organization. Your interest in and support of our work are greatly appreciated. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast. We invite you to join the conversation. Check us out at citizenarts.org and let us know what you think. And always, please stay healthy in mind and body, wealthy in goodwill, and wise in action.